Before Kana left the hallway, the girl turned around and clutched the envelope to her chest. The message was beautifully packed, but inside it was an invitation from the imperial family. Isabel smirked. Even the fact that Kana had received an invitation to the second princess's birthday party didn't make her angry, as it was a mere formality for the Addis family. Pushing Kana, her sister laughed that she didn't have the courage to go to the event anyway. After all, she was still a laughingstock in the aristocratic world. Kana pulled the envelope from her sister's hands. She was not bothered by rare statements. Isabel mistook silence for victory. She again began to boast that, unlike Kana, she could go out with her head held high. The girl said that she would always be the beloved daughter of Alexandro Addis, regardless of what actions she could commit. Then she turned around and went to the bedroom, asking Kana not to go beyond what was allowed. A few months had passed, and the people in this manor had not changed. They still wanted to see Kana cornered by a girl who could not stand up for herself. Kana chuckled at her conclusions. She would not allow herself to live by the rules of this estate. As a child, when Kana first had her own laboratory, she began to spend a lot of time studying alchemy. She did not want to spend much time in the house. It was easier for her to hide in the basement and remain unnoticed. Alchemy was Kana's innate talent, so she sought to benefit from the use of this knowledge. After all, extracting magic from a monostone requires innate abilities. When Kana conducted an experiment to bring the flower back to life, she realized that alchemy was connected to her life forever. At that time, the girl was still full of warm hopes that she would find praise for her success, but her father demanded that the experiments be stopped. On that day, Kana made a promise that no one would recognize her talent, or her father threatened to close the lab. In another life, as Li Juhua, Kana was able to realize her dreams of a happy life. There was no father, so she was free in her desires. However, it was reckless to forget about the past. Her father would never stop hating her, so there was no need to create illusions that her successes would be important to him. Kana was in no hurry to leave the corridor. The pain of resentment from forgetfulness, which she succumbed to in the office, weighed on her soul. Clutching the envelope with the invitation, the girl threw it on the floor out of resentment. She could not hold back the hysteria and began to shout insults at her father for the fact that he turned out to be a psychopath who likes to torture his daughter. The plan failed. She could not leave the manor, and divorce too. So more than ever, Kana wanted to be in the body of Li Juhua again. Having calmed down, the girl sat down on the floor of the corridor. She could no longer live like a basement rat, which meant she needed to come up with a new plan. The main goal remains a divorce, after which Kana will be able to leave and start living the life she had in Li Juhua's body. She had a dream to open a hospital in her name. Maybe the place and the body have changed, but this is what Kana has worked hard for many years. The girl headed to the dungeon. She lit a lantern to study the records in the laboratory. She may not return to another world, but she must always have a plan in case she has to rebuild her life on the Western continent. After collecting all the notes, Kana realized that Isabel had given her a new chance to achieve a divorce. The invitation to the birthday party of the second princess was a great occasion to make a statement. After all, such an event will bring together the most famous and influential aristocrats of the empire. Kana looked at herself in the mirror. Her aristocrat status cannot be taken away just like that. She is the Duchess of Valentino from the Addis family, although her name had never received compliments before, a name that had been stripped of her status as a mistress. According to rumors, Kana Addis was a woman reduced to the level of a servant and deprived of the grandeur available to her husband. It's time to get rid of her bad reputation. Now people shouldn't be afraid of her black hair and eyes just because they're signs of sin. Now, the time has come for Kana Addis to become a mistress in front of whom other people are afraid to raise their eyes, not because of bad rumors, but because of her superiority over others. There was a knock on the door of the laboratory, taking the girl by surprise. Cullen entered the room and heard the news of her father's refusal to approve Kana's divorce. The girl was advised by her brother that he should deal with her father himself, because he could not kick her out of the house while her father's order was in force. Cullen was hurt by the fact that his sister planned to spend all his time in the basement, and he offered to help move the laboratory to the top floor. Her brother's care bribed the girl. He persistently asked her to change her place so that she would not hide in dirty rooms. But from the past, she clearly remembered that any interest of her brother in her affairs was just a mask. At any moment, he could deliver a verbal blow that shattered all hopes of rapprochement. After all, even in the past, he personally advised Kana not to go upstairs, but to spend all his time in the basement. Remembering the events of the past, the girl rudely asked her brother not to go down to her basement without important news. Then, they would have a chance to improve their relationship. Cullen tried to address his sister, but Kana was angry at his attempts to call her sister, so she again reminded him of their agreement to make do with only names. But the poison that was splashing in the girl's chest burst out. She recommended that Cullen call her Duchess Valentino if her name was unpleasant to him. The guy was not stupid. He understood the hint that they did not intend to talk to him, so he offered to make a new deal. But the guy didn't have a proposal, so he started making it up, hinting to Kana that she could still take care of Lucy. The girl did not like this conversation. She decided that Cullen was hinting that he did not trust her. But the guy asked his sister to pay attention to the fact that Lucy would always have health problems. Due to pressure from other family members, Lucy cannot be completely relaxed, so the symptoms of paralysis may recur. Kana knew before that she and Lucy looked alike, but when Cullen voiced it, he gave the girl a choice. Her brother offered to create a remedy that would keep Lucy's mind and body in good shape, because she can keep silent about the pain she is experiencing. Her brother promised to pay whatever price Kana would pay for taking care of Lucy. The silence dragged on. Cullen waited for conditions from his sister. After weighing the possibilities, Kana named the price of 2,000 gold coins. Such a price is a significant amount even for aristocrats. The answer from the brother came immediately. He agrees to the payment. The suddenness of the answer surprised the girl. She clarified that she needed gold coins, not silver ones. She could not understand why he was trying so hard to please her. The guy assured his sister that he did not care about the price. He would pay any price if Kana said a different price. Resigned, Kana asked her brother for a maid who would have good skills and a strong character. Cullen's generosity was useful, but Kana doubted that he would fulfill her conditions. At least once she saw how Cullen was ready for anything that Lucy asked of him. A question arose in the girl's mind if Cullen would have done something like this in the past. But now there was no answer, so the girl stretched out her hand to him in an incomprehensible gesture. After thinking about it, Kana announced that from now on, Cullen would be her escort to the second princess's birthday banquet. A few days passed. Kana was waiting for Cullen to surrender, because going to a banquet with an outcast would be humiliating for him. Although they concluded a contract after discussion, it did not guarantee anything. So far, Kana did not know what exactly the guy was up to, but she did not intend to deviate from the contract. She was going to give out of Cullen's capabilities everything she needed to carry out the new plan. Kana has a new maid named Rhea at her disposal as a result of one of the clauses of the contract. The maid was very cheerful, which sometimes seemed to Kana that she was very naive for service in the Duke's estate. The girl sat down in front of the mirror. She wanted to test the maid's haircut skills. For the upcoming banquet, Kana decided to change the length of her bangs. The maid began to cut her hair, carefully getting rid of excess hair length, while Kana instructed her about the tasks that she needed to make it before the banquet. Watching the work, Kana decided to try the tricks of their past life. When the girl finished the haircut, Kana praised her for the good result, which embarrassed the servant. But in a second, panic swept over Rhea. She shuddered and began to apologize. Having calmed down, the girl admitted that she did not expect gratitude, which caused Kana to smile sincerely. The day of the banquet came. Orsini and Isabel came to Cullen's room, shocked by the news of their brother Kana's escort to the event. Isabel did not understand how her brother could be so humiliated in front of a sister who was not even respected by other aristocrats. Orsini was angry, trying to convey to Cullen how low his reputation would fall if he decided to go out into high society with an outcast. Cullen disagreed with his brother, but he was cheerful, because he would never go to an event with a man who bears the stigma of the family. For a moment, Orsini tried to imagine such a trick, but his pride did not allow it. Isabel also agreed with her brother. She did not want to go to events with Kana. Orsini decided that he and Isabel would go to the banquet separately from Cullen. Cullen was not interested in the proposals of his relatives. He firmly decided that today he would spend time with his other sister. Orsini waved it off and headed for the exit. He did not want to care about his brother's reputation if he did not want to do it himself. Isabel followed her brother, though she managed to give Cullen a snarky grin. The room echoed from the banging of the doors, which the Orsini slammed with anger. Cullen stayed to wait for his sister. He did not see her for 2 weeks. She was hiding from him as best she could within the walls of the mansion. Lucy's treatment went according to the contract, but due to his busy studies and work, Cullen could not see Canna. A couple of times he met Rhea, but she was too busy with errands that Cullen did not have time to meet with the servants. The guy decided that if he started asking questions about Canna's life, she would treat him even colder. Cullen assumed that his sister was deliberately avoiding him, but knowing her new personality, this was not characteristic of her. Especially now that he had started to take care of her, his mood was constantly improving. Most likely, at that moment, in the laboratory, when they were preparing to sign a new contract, a sense of guilt awoke in him. In a moment, he began to feel uncomfortable, as if only guilt was pulling him to his sister. But maybe it's not just about guilt. The actions of the past deserve to beg for forgiveness. The guy threw the thoughts out of his head. Now he doesn't need memories. He needs to focus on the upcoming evening. After all, his sister does not need anything from him, so he should not want anything from her. The guy decided that all dubious feelings would disappear as soon as the evening together was over. Canna appeared in the room. Cullen managed to notice her approaching, but what he saw startled him. The girl held out her hand to him as he got up from the sofa. The guy was mesmerized. He reached out his palm to Canna's hand without hesitation. Taking the girl's hand, the guy tried to cope with his emotions, but his face did not hide admiration. In recent weeks, Canna had spent a lot of time preparing for the banquet, so her outfit was made in the style of another world where she lived as Li Ju. The red and black shades on the dress looked incredible on her, and the girl understood this, so tonight she would not be intimidated by Canna Addis. She would appear before the aristocrats as the proud Duchess Valentino. Cullen was shocked when he saw his sister, so he couldn't even hear the question she asked him. Coming closer, the girl again asked how well the fragrance of the perfume suited her. Only on the second try, the guy noticed that the floral aroma emanating from the girl was unique. Cullen complimented the girl as befits an aristocrat, but Canna still noticed a slight embarrassment on his face. She had spent the past few days in the lab recreating the perfume she had used in Li Juhua's body, and the result that the perfume had on Cullen satisfied her, because even in another world, perfume makes an impression. Without waiting any longer, the girl headed towards the exit from the living room. Grabbing her brother by the arm, she led him along, because from that moment on, the countdown of time that Cullen had to spend with his sister began. The whole situation was new to Cullen, and under emotion, he almost called Canna his sister, but remembered their agreements in time. Isabel Addis arrived at the imperial banquet before everyone else, so she managed to sneak into the princess's room to complain about Canna's upcoming visit. The girl knew that the princess had been wanting to meet Canna for a very long time, so she could not miss the opportunity to tell some gossip. The banquet had long begun, but before Isabel arrived, Princess Lillian spent her time drinking tea alone. The princess had a long-standing dislike for Canna, because it was her that Duke Valentino married in order not to marry the imperial daughter. But in all 7 years of marriage, Canna never attended an event where Lillian could see her. The princess knew that the marriage between Sylvian and Kenai was an arranged marriage, but it was a surprise that the duke's wife decided to go out anyway. Isabel went to the balcony, but Leon watched her closely because many people knew about Otis's family relationships. At the few events that Canna attended, she always hid from prying eyes, and family members pretended that they were not even her relatives. It is on rumors and discussions that Lillian's attitude towards Canna Valentino is based, so in her eyes, Duke Valentino's wife always looked pathetic and despised. Isabel screamed, which attracted the attention of the princess, who found tea drinking more interesting than celebrating a birthday. There were loud whispers from the banquet hall that reached the princess's balcony, and while Isabel was angry, Lillian was in the mood to meet Canna. The arrival at the Cannes banquet, accompanied by Cullen, caused a resonance among the aristocrats, who could not believe that Duchess Valentino appeared at the event. However, the girl and her brother proudly walked through the crowd of guests, ignoring the discussion of the girl's black hair. Now it's time for new gossip for the world of the nobility, because the incredibly beautiful girl did not seem to be pathetic Canna Addis. The proud, confident, but not frightened and despised Duchess Valentino walked past them. Princess Lillian watched the couple's procession from the balcony, but was in no hurry to comment on what she saw. While Isabel was terrified that new gossip would soon fall on her, the princess calmly examined Canna. Many young aristocrats began to discuss the beauty of Duchess Valentino and paid no attention to anything else. The girl noticed lustful glances in her direction, but everything went according to her expectations. However, she was annoyed that Cullen did not leave her side, even though the escort time had long since ended. The girl hinted to her brother that the agreement was fulfilled, but he did not take his eyes off the crowd and refused to let his sister go. The guy took his sister to the last table. He answered all the girl's questions about his behavior very evasively. Handing his sister a glass of wine, Cullen continued to remain attentive, which annoyed Canna even more, because as long as he was next to her, her further plan would not be carried out. Canna felt that from the moment she arrived at the banquet, Princess Lillian had been keeping an eye on her, and Canna's whole plan had been hatched so that she could meet a girl who wanted to get Sylvie and Valentino. But as long as Cullen was with her, she couldn't approach the princess, and Canna didn't know how to get her brother's attention either. Suddenly, a friendly voice came from the crowd of guests, the owner of which was surprised by Cullen's appearance at the banquet. A young guy made his way through a group of aristocrats, he told nonsense, but only to come closer and give a few compliments to the girl. While the stranger tried to be nice, Canna was surprised by his pretense that he did not know the girl, because all the guests found out that Canna Addis was next to Cullen. The stranger introduced himself as Colleen. The girl clearly understood his intention, because he paid attention to her only because of her appearance. Behind the nobleman's friendly speech, the girl clearly heard the subtext that he did not expect to see such a beauty after all the rumors about her ugliness. Colleen was very close, picked up the girl's hand, and began to convince her to meet him again after the banquet. Suddenly, the aristocrat's wrist fell into the steel grip of someone else's hand, causing him to cry out. Cullen was angry. He dragged Colleen away from his sister while he tried to justify that he had no ulterior motives for dating the girl. Cullen was not interested in false excuses. He hinted to the guy that he should return to his fiancée. Cullen's face burned with rage, and he decided to take Colin to the garden himself, where he could spend the rest of the evening in the company of his future wife. Pushing the aristocrat forward, Cullen followed, and while Canna watched the conflict, she became incomprehensible to her brother's sharp reaction to meeting her. Cullen blocked his sister from Colleen's gaze and continued to push the guy towards the exit. However, after turning around for a second, Cullen asked Canna to stay where she was and promised to return to her soon. Canna silently watched the boys leave, but she wanted Cullen and his friend to stay in the garden for the rest of the banquet. She had no desire to play family games, because she had little time to meet Princess Lillian. Glancing at the balcony, Canna noticed that the princess was no longer there, which meant that she needed to take the first step before they met. The short wait ended when Princess Lillian's voice rang out behind Canna. Her Majesty walked through the crowd of guests. She was heading towards Can, with her head held high. Gathering her strength, Canna smiled charmingly and greeted the princess. Lillian didn't show emotion, but Canna knew that today she needed to make the princess stand by her side as an ally. Everyone knew the news that Princess Lillian had chosen Duke Valentino as her husband, and her influence did not allow Sylvian to refuse the wedding. And while things were moving towards the wedding, Sylvian decided to tie himself to a contract with Canna in order to avoid marrying the princess. Although Canna stole the princess's husband after the wedding, she never met Lillian. And the events that Duke Valentino attended always took place only with the Duke's visit, without his wife. With each new banquet or dinner without the Duke's wife, Lillian felt more angry as she couldn't understand what was so special about Addis and Can. And now, when Canna Valentino herself came to the banquet in honor of the birth, Lillian did not know what to do. The princess discreetly admitted that Canna was the only one of all the guests at the banquet whom she wanted to meet. But the hospitality of Canna did not impress Lillian. The girl said that she was not a man on whom a woman's charm could work. The princess's straightforwardness amazed Canna. But it was even better, because they can both be frank about their goals. Lillian waved his fan in delight, covering his smile. She understood the game that Canna had started. Without hesitation, Lillian declared that Canna had stolen what was rightfully hers. Unable to get Sylvian's heart, Lillian demanded an answer, for which Canna Addis started the whole game with the wedding. The princess's mood changed. She hinted that she would not tolerate Canna trying to evade the truth. Canna hadn't answered yet, but the way the princess felt the subtext in her actions struck the girl's mind. Canna said that she was at the banquet because of her husband, because rumors about his neglect of his wife should definitely have reached the ears of the princess. Lillian has been following the situation in the Duke's marriage for a long time. Some aristocrats have repeatedly shared that Duke Valentino is very cold to his wife. Lillian reminded Canna that relations in the Valentino family had always been strained, but the girl replied that there was no hope for a change in the Duke's character. The princess smirked. Sylvian's temper did not bother her. On the contrary, she found a special masculine charm in it. Kana felt embarrassed. Such an imprudent attitude towards the Duke would definitely lead the princess to problems. The girl decided to go with the main argument. She said that she was tired of her husband's indifference. After that, Kana began to dramatically play the role of a tired wife, because now, after so many years of cold relations, she had no confidence left to continue marital relations. The princess was in no hurry to rejoice. She was like a snake, patiently looking for a catch, in the words of the Duchess. But when she announced that she had returned to the family home, and the divorce took a difficult path that is difficult for an aristocrat to overcome, Kana saw an undisguised interest in Lillian's eyes, so she continued to convince her that the honor of the Otis family came first for her, which is why Duke Otis did not approve of the divorce. But now that the marriage could not be saved, Kana tried to use any methods. Princess Lillian listened attentively to the Duchess's words, so she even stopped waving her fan. Kana had several options on how to put pressure on the princess. She could spread rumors about her husband's frivolity and craving for infidelity. Or if the princess decides to act and get Sylvian Valentino back, she can put pressure on Duke Otis using her status as an imperial family. After waiting a little while for the princess to analyze the information, Kana offered to conclude an alliance, as a result of which Lillian would be able to possess Sylvian again. However, the princess noticed that Kana was trying to deceive her, so she chuckled. Kana realized that a little more arguments and the princess would agree, because her eyes lit up when she heard about the divorce process. The girl was about to voice a new proposal when a quick stomp of women's shoes was heard in the banquet hall. Countess Elister ran to the corner where Lillian and Kana stood, a little out of breath, and demanded to know what they were talking about. Calming down, the woman took a glass of wine and began to wait for an answer, but her appearance infuriated Kana because she always came at the wrong time. The princess decided to make sure that Kana was not lying, so she told the Countess Kana's story, excluding the divorce from mention. Countess Elister confirmed her daughter-in-law's words, but said that it was she who drove Kana out of the Valentino estate. The Countess's confident tone angered Kana, who did not have the courage to kick her out of the estate. But now, looking into the eyes of the princess, Josephine is trying to show her status as a mistress. To distract the princess, Josephine began to laugh and accuse Kana of trying to get Sylvian's attention by doing stupid things. The Countess's words calmed Lillian. She made sure that Kana, who so desired marriage with the Duke, would never demand a divorce, and the whole situation with returning to the family estate was just a game. Now Lillian remembered how one day her maid had brought a rumor that Kana was on her knees begging her husband for attention. Such rumors came to the world of aristocrats from the Valentino estate itself, so each time they became more and more stupid because of the actions of the Duke's wife. The princess realized that for a long time, Kana had been trying to return the Duke's gaze in her direction, and even went so far as to use the imperial family. Kana Valentino played with the princess and her passion for Sylvian, which at one point made her a puppet in her hands. The girl came up with a lot of unnecessary facts, but the thought hung in her mind that she would not allow herself to be manipulated. Kana did not like the course of the meeting, but she found it amusing that despite high expectations, the princess turned out to be stupid. But before Kana could say that the princess was wrong, a glass of wine flew in her direction. The liquid burst into tears, but Kana noticed the princess's furious face after she realized what she had done. Kana looked down at her dress after the princess stepped away from her. Josephine stood motionless, her face a mixture of surprise and shock at the princess's uncultured behavior. Drops of red liquid dripped down Kana's dress, staining all the fabric up to the hem. Lillian tossed her glass aside, and then said dryly that everything that had happened by accident, and that she was sorry. Straightening her dress a little, Kana let the last drops of wine drip down, but she did not start a scandal. Turning to the princess, Kana smiled sweetly and calmed the girl, because she herself saw how the princess's hand slipped. Josephine didn't dare to enter into the conversation. She couldn't believe that Kana could be so crazy that she wouldn't notice the princess's obvious provocation. Lillian was amused by the girl's humility. Not being rebuffed the first time, she reached for another glass of wine. Pointing the glass in the direction of Kana, Lillian said with a grin that she was ready for a new accident. And before that happened, Duchess Valentino had to answer one question. Suddenly, a loud cry of a woman was heard in the banquet hall. who demanded to explain the reason for the noise at a social event. Kana and Lillian instantly fell silent, their scandal leading to the fact that both looked in the worst light. After all, right now, the Empress of the Western continent herself was walking in their direction with a slow, now confident gait. The invited aristocrat stepped aside so as not to disturb the mistress, who stopped next to the girls and waited for an answer to her question. The woman's face looked demanding. She was not ready to let girls' quarrels spoil the event. Kana noticed how Lillian abruptly removed her glass of wine behind her back to hide her actions in front of the Empress. It took the princess a few seconds to get her bearings, but under the woman's gaze, she panicked. Kana realized that she needed to hide, after all, most likely. But the Empress was aware of all the conversations at the banquet. But suddenly the girl came up with an idea and decided to take advantage of the Empress's attention for her own purposes. So without waiting, she let out a sob. Kana shed a couple of tears and, in her excuses, began to apologize for causing a scandal at the event. Lillian and Josephine were shocked by Kana's sudden change in mood, because now it was like a different person in front of them. Countess Elister, feeling strong, began to shout and accuse Kana of not behaving pitiably as an aristocrat. The Empress demanded that the Countess be silent, and then approached Kana while the woman behind her was panicked by the mistress's behavior. In the next second, the Empress hugged Kana and allowed her to cry with motherly care. For Kana, such an act was sudden, but in order not to stop crying and not spoil the pretense, she began to apologize to the woman's shoulder, not holding back her tears even more. Lillian watched the scene unfold in disgust in front of her, but she couldn't make any objection as long as the Emperor's wife was nearby. But the princess did not expect that she would be the last person whom the woman would blame for the quarrel. Then the Empress took notice of Lillian and threatened that the second princess needed to be more sensitive and well-mannered. The woman had always loved to compare princesses, and now she hinted that Lillian should work hard to get closer to the gentle nature of the first princess. As the Empress scolded Lillian, Kana wiped away her tears, but the whole atmosphere seemed very incomprehensible to her. Princess Lillian was the daughter of a concubine, so in the eyes of the Empress, she was always inferior in behavior to the first princess. Although the Empress had previously allowed reprimands to be made towards Lillian, it had not happened in public before. Lillian understood the threat in the woman's words. Now she needs to be much more careful and not lose control, even if Kana Addis is nearby. A young woman came out of the crowd. She walked up to Lillian and hugged the girl and tried to smooth things over. Once in her mother's arms, Lillian calmed down, giving her the opportunity to calm the Empress. It took Kana a little time to understand who this woman was. Although she had not met her before, most of the plays popular on the Western continent had a story about an emperor's concubine who achieved this status from a very poor family. Watching Teresa Iseberg, Kana felt a special power that radiated from the woman, because even in a difficult situation, she remained calm and polite to the Empress. Perhaps the concubine's words had convinced the Empress that Lillian would not be rude again, but nevertheless the woman stopped screaming. Grabbing Kana by the arm, the woman headed for the stairs, asking Teresa to follow her promises about the second princess's behavior. Leaving the surprised guests behind, the Empress hugged the girl and invited her to drink tea with her. The Empress was well versed in the palace, so she led Kana along the far corridors so that she would not hear the new gossip that filled the banquet hall. Sudden concern alerted her, so she needed to understand the Empress's hidden plan, because she led Kana to the farthest room of the mansion. The butler opened the doors as the woman invited Kana into the living room for a private conversation. Letting the Empress go ahead, the girl hesitated a little at the aisle. Now the banquet was no longer boring for her, but she was not ready to play the imperial games. Before attending the banquet, Kana spent a lot of time with Ray in the laboratory. While working together, the girl learned from the maid that since the control of herbs was introduced in the capital, she had not practiced medicine. But the terrible thing was that everyone who was engaged in the cultivation of herbs received the stigma of charlatans who did not obey the orders of the first princess. Suddenly, the memories came to Kana's mind in time, because the Empress led her to the living room, where a certain girl was waiting for them. Sitting on the sofa in the twilight was a girl whose face was hidden behind a dark veil. According to the Empress, it was the first princess of the Aslan Empire named Amelia. The princess did not move when Kana politely introduced herself. Bowing, Kana glanced at the princess. Now it became clear to her why the Empress had personally come to the banquet for her. Many questions were in Kana's mind, but the girl remembered the veil on Lucy's face when they first met, and realized that the only reason for hiding the princess's face could lie in a skin disease. The ladies sat around the table as the maids brought them herbal tea. The Empress was straightforward. She knew about Lucy's treatment and wanted to know more about the new medicines. Canna was wary. All information about Lucy's treatment was under the secret of the Otis family, so the Empress should not know even the smallest details. Noticing the confusion in the girl's eyes, the woman encouraged her and advised her not to be shy. The Empress admitted that Chloe Addis herself told her about Canna's treatment methods, and such information was unexpected for the girl. She knew that Chloe Addis never does anything to help other people, so recommending Canna's skills might be a ruse. But suddenly, the girl realized that all this could be a provocation, and the Empress initially lured her into a trap. After all, if she refuses to treat Princess Amelia right now, then most likely her quiet life will end. And if she agrees but makes a mistake in the treatment, she will be branded a charlatan, and Lucy will have problems as an accomplice in deception. After weighing the options, Kana evasively agreed that Lucy's treatment was her merit. Although the girl kept silent about the chances of curing the princess, it was enough for the Empress that the rumors turned out to be true. Turning to her daughter, the woman ordered her to remove the veil from her face. The princess did not move from me. Her body was tense, but the Empress did not want to wait and demanded that I open my face. There was a hitch between mother and daughter. The girl refused to take off the veil, which made the Empress very angry. Not a pitiful scandal, Princess Amelia abruptly pulled off her handkerchief, which caused fright on Canna's face. The princess waved her handkerchief in indignation, but even from the shadow of the room you could see strange spots on her face. Looking closer, Canna noticed that the spots had a red tint, and the skin around them was peeling. It turned out that the long-term rumors about the incurable illness of the first princess turned out to be true. There were many versions of what the girl was sick with, but in the circle of nobles, everyone agreed that mold was growing on the princess's body, which could not be cured. The Empress said that many doctors cannot fully heal the princess, and recently the symptoms have manifested themselves with greater intensity. Canna became the woman's last hope, but without a full examination of the body, the girl could not assess whether the disease was treatable. The Empress hurried the girl with the examination, but Princess Amelia did not like this decision. Amelia had already removed the veil from her face, so that should be enough for a medical report. It was clear that the princess was disgusted with her own appearance, which was why she reacted so aggressively to the inspection. But the Empress ordered the girl to undress and show all the stains that were on her body, and such an order put the girl into a stupor. Canna was embarrassed to witness the princess being treated like this, but she didn't want her to take off her clothes right now. There was silence in the living room. The princess was ashamed of the Empress's order and did not know how to behave. Gritting her teeth, the princess tried to restrain her message to insult her mother. But this did not last long. And the next second she asked the Empress with a sarcastic cry what else she should do after she exposed herself as a half-naked clown in a dark closet. Canna did not meet in conversation. Family relations did not concern her, but she felt sympathy for Amelia. Emotions got the better of the princess. In a fit of quarrel, she offered to go out without a veil into the banquet hall, so that not only Canna would laugh at her appearance, but all the guests of the event. Impulsive behavior irritated the Empress, because a skin disease spreads throughout the body, which means an examination is necessary. The princess began to be childishly capricious and refused to undergo an examination. But when she got tired of arguing, she stated that she wouldn't show her duchess body right now, so her mother could stop arguing about it. Canna didn't know how long she had been around the imperial family, but she was already sick of screaming. Although she could understand the princess's feelings, excessive impulsivity would definitely not help the treatment. From her past life, Canna remembered how sensitive patients can be because the disease inspires them with fear. But people who take care of the patient are also subject to this fear, so it is also possible to understand the aggressive behavior of the Empress. Although the situation of the imperial family was overly emotional, since it was here, it was most likely their last hope for healing. Suddenly, the Empress could not restrain herself and began to curse everything, because in noble society she is considered a mother who gave birth to a rotting corpse, because Amelia's illness does not go away for many years. Although Canna understood that now the Empress treats the girl as a daughter, and then she pays attention to the status of the first princess. But the words about the rotting corpse cooled the princess's ardor. She threw the veil to the floor and apologized that her mother had to worry about rumors, so she could just die. The empress did not appreciate her daughter's words. She was now speaking with emotions that were difficult for both of them to contain. The whole conflict took place on the personal dissatisfaction of each party. Now Amelia was hurt by her mother calling her a rotting corpse. Laughing hysterically, the princess asked her mother to be honest and ask her to die faster than they would spend even more time looking for a cure. Canna silently watched the altercation. The princess could not calm down and began to list the ways of her death so that the empress could choose the appropriate one. The woman jumped up from the couch. She was tired of her daughter's screams and threatened that she would punish her if she continued to behave disrespectfully and say absurd things. The situation was too negative now, so Canna caught the empress's attention to give her opinion. At the moment, she does not have medical instruments to examine, so they should consider another time and place. Smiling sweetly, Canna promised that she would soon visit the imperial palace herself, where she would be able to carry out all the procedures. The empress calmed down. She could only agree to this proposal, so she did not detain Canna any longer. The woman escorted Canna to the door. She wanted to return to the banquet, and she also needed time to think things over before visiting the palace again. Once in the corridor, the girl was able to exhale calmly. Being a witness to other people's quarrels was very exhausting for her. She assumed that after she left, the conflict in the living room would continue, only it would become even harder. Canna did not know how many times the princess could quarrel with her mother, but the fact was that after each conflict, the hope in Amelia's heart was extinguished. Turning to the door to the living room, the girl heard muffled screams, which meant that the quarrel had continued. After standing at the door for a while, Canna listened to the screams until she heard the princess crying. Then the girl left the corridor and was able to find a balcony where there was no music and other people's voices. Too much had happened in one evening. She was not used to such banquets, so now her head was beginning to ache from overexertion. The first plan, according to which it was necessary to negotiate with the second princess, turned out to be a failure. But it led to the fact that Canna had a trump card, and if she played the treatment of the first princess correctly, then there was still a chance to get to Lillian. However, among other things, getting closer to the empress would be a good opportunity for her reputation, because when she left the corridor, she couldn't help but notice one detail. All the aristocrats who became visitors to the banquet looked at her differently. Her first impressions ceased to make admiration on them. Now there was no goodwill in their eyes, and no one dared to approach her first. It was obvious that there was a never-ending interest in her persona behind this behavior, and if she managed to cure Amelia, it would add even more reputation points. In her thoughts, the girl did not notice that a guy made his way to her balcony. Only the soft rustle of footsteps made her turn and notice Orsini, who was slowly approaching her. In a second, the girl was taken aback. She did not want new conflicts this evening. But the expression on Orsini's face was strange. He did not seek to yell at her, but only looked at her with interest. Canna decided that her brother had become so bold that he was ready to get into an altercation with her without even inspecting the balcony for strangers. The guy walked over to the railing. He apologized benevolently for not expecting to meet someone on the street at a late hour. Suddenly, the guy smiled and paid a compliment. He was delighted with the beauty of the girl and did not expect to meet her. Canna was shocked. The way her brother lowered his voice and compliments did not connect in her head, and she decided that he was definitely crazy. Looking at the guy from behind her bangs, the girl realized that he definitely did not recognize her, which is why he behaved so freely. The girl was in no hurry to enter into a dialogue, but this did not stop the guy, and he again began to demonstrate his sensual nature. Noticing that the night was beautiful tonight, he stared at the girl, waiting for at least some answer. Canna still pressed her palm to her face. The thought that her brother did not recognize her relaxed her, but she did not want to reveal all the cards ahead of time. Thoughts raged inside the girl. From the compliment that she was a beautiful lady, she felt sick. But most likely her brother succumbed to the illusion that in the light of the night, the girl's black hair was just a shade of blonde. Canna did not think that Orsini was subject to such foolish conclusions, and not to recognize in the dark the hair and eyes of his sister, whom he despised so much, was an incredible event. Suddenly, the girl had the idea that she could take advantage of her brother's position and play a cruel joke on him. So she laughed lightly and accepted a compliment from him. The guy was inspired, of course. He had shown courtesy to girls before, but this one made a strong impression on him, and her interest in him was a great achievement for Orsini. Kana tried to moderate the guy's fuse. She brushed off his excessive courtesy and admitted that she was not yet used to a large number of compliments because she attended social events very rarely. Playing along with the guy, Kana said that her visit today was an exception, but even this banquet was not a suitable place for her. Orsini remarked that they were very similar, as he didn't like such events either, but Kana caught the lie in this, because all Orsini likes to do is drink and have fun. The guy decided to interest the girl and offered to walk with him in the garden. The longer Orsini did not understand the deception, the more cheerful Kana became, so she could not miss the opportunity for a walk.
Like this video. Hit the like button and subscribe for more videos.